schools are appallingly bad. 95 out of 100. I would have visited thousands of schools in this state. When I visit the school, I actually spend time in the school. I go to each class and I ask every question, I spend time, I have a sense of what's happening. So I'm not speaking casually. I don't think there's any other official or a political figure or a public worker in this state who has gone to so many schools and spent so much time in school kids everywhere. Believe me, in 95% cases it's a disaster. So we need to help. But in a creative, obviously you can't take over their jobs. That's not your job. But we can leverage our strengths in a way that the outcomes are much bigger than the effort indicates. And that's where our skill should lie. Then how to adopt schools. What I mean by adoption is, for instance, if there are some lacuna there, and oftentimes you'll find that there's no math teacher, there's no English teacher, there's no something else. You actually go and help. Instead of complaining and criticizing, you say, look, I can give you an hour or 2 hours a week. I'll be happy to come and study with these kids. Make the teachers, the headmaster and others your partners. Don't be a big boss who's coming to snow ground and to spy and to boss over them. Be a very humble person who is trying to help them out because you know how hard it is for them to cope with this, and there are very few teachers. And the kids are very demanding. Therefore, you're trying to help them out. You're trying to relieve them of the burdens. That should be the approach. And then start with some small interventions where even 100, 200 rupees, you can see a lot of things. You don't require thousands of rupees. You will see a shade is broken for the teacher. You will see a blackboard is not a blackboard at all. You will see there are no chapters. All kinds of silly things are there. Once you start making a small little difference for a period of time, they'll start trusting you. If you go and boss over and say, I have some vision of a school, the school is useless, and third-grade teachers, I want to revolutionize. You can say you can have your revolution somewhere else. That doesn't help. You must sort of ingratiate yourself. It's not deceptive. It's being humble. It's trying to actually understand the problems and be a part of the solution. And then you will find that they actually are very receptive and they will support you. On occasion, even then, somebody will be thinking that you are a nuisance because for him, that's merely a paycheck. He's not bothered with education. So you will encounter them also on occasion, maybe 5-10% people. Then you'll have to deal with them as you go along. But on day one, if you have confrontation and a superiority and inferiority, things will not work. And the mentoring of kids, even if you can't spare too much time, if once in a while you go, you get to know them and actually know them, and the kids understand that you care, and you give them some kind of emotional support, and give them some kind of guidance and counseling on a regular basis, believe me, that is immense value. If an ordinary engineering student goes there regularly, for a school kid there, there's a huge aspiration to become an engineering student. If that kid actually spends time with them regularly and then tells them how to go about and what to study and how to go, and then it makes things a little fun, they look up to you. Because for them, there's no other role model in life. There's nothing exciting in their life apart from some third-rate film. This becomes very exciting. They look forward to these encounters. And that's what shapes the mind of a child. If we just look back into our own childhood, how many people shaped our lives because their influence, maybe they spent an hour or two with us, what they told us, the way they talked to us, that made an impact on our lives. Even that has tremendous value. You forget it. It's not really going and simply starting teaching. About some kind of infrastructural system exercise for education, I entirely agree with you. Particularly urban areas today, to build infrastructure for education is an incredibly difficult task. It's a hugely costly affair, and even very rich charitable organizations cannot afford that. Right now we don't have it, unfortunately. At best, if somebody like Narayan wants to start a great university, maybe somebody will come forward and say, even for that there is no adequate legal framework, only now they are trying to address that. And maybe one or two such universities will come up, but for schools and all that, they haven't even thought about it. But I agree with you, it should be considered, particularly for urban areas. Last question, the inevitable one. I didn't expect it today, but let's come anyway. Reservations based on caste. Because I would have addressed probably about 10,000 or so gatherings in the past 15 years all over the world, of all kinds, from the poorest to the richest. Most of my interactions are actually interactive. And therefore I encourage people to ask questions, either orally or in writing. The most commonly asked question is reservations. There is almost no single audience where this question did not come up so far. It's how much our society is driven by this very contentious issue. But I keep giving this answer ad nauseum. You forget whether reservation is good or bad. You start with something more basic. The fact is, as we discussed today, the future of 80% of the children of this country is determined by birth, at birth, because of the circumstances of birth. First, let's acknowledge this. If you pretend to be an astrologer, go to your household when a child is born, and look at the surroundings and make an assessment of the family's net worth as well as educational status, and then make a prediction. 25 years later, in 80 out of 100 cases, probably 90 out of 100 cases, your prediction is going to be right. I'm absolutely certain about it. We just make this mind experiment. You do this, you understand. Now, in a society where the bulk of the children have no future merely because of birth, we have to do something. Now, that something is reservation or not, we'll come to it later. But we have to do something first, and something dramatic and something different. There's a huge problem. We're not acknowledging the problem. Those of us who have the privilege either to be born in different circumstances or to come out of these circumstances and therefore don't understand the pain of it any longer. If we don't acknowledge the problem in the first place, there's an elephant in the room, we pretend the elephant doesn't exist, and then we go about life normally, as if everything is okay. Everything is not okay. Everything is disgusting. 80% kids have no future, for no fault of theirs. This is simply not right. It is because of this recognition that our founding fathers came into the idea of reservations as a temporary reparation. Ambedkar and others assumed it was a temporary reparation. They believed that they were building a constitution and a state structure which would address this iniquity in society, would give education quickly to everybody, would not allow birth to be a source of disadvantage to the bulk of the children in a short span of time. And therefore they said, for just about 10 years, let's have some reservations, not as an answer to the problem, but to tell the people who are suffering the disadvantage that, look, the society is serious about this problem. Trust us. This is a temporary reparation. But meanwhile, we are doing things to permanently address this problem. The tragedy of India is what was meant to be a temporary reparation has become a permanent solution. And we have failed to actually find the permanent solution, namely quality education accessible to every single child in the country, irrespective of the status of birth. Like in Britain and elsewhere, whether it's a Prime Minister's child or a coal miner's kid, can go to the same school and be reasonably confident of decent quality of education. Even there, good quality private schooling definitely gives them a certain edge. But that edge is marginal. The cost is substantial. The bulk of the kids can actually fulfill their potential in their neighborhood schools in most cases. We have not even remotely created anything like that. That's our discussion last 2 hours. If the last 2 hours discussion was not necessary, then reservations are not necessary in India today. The tragedy is, in the last 2 hours discussion, we find that there is a huge problem. We probably will take another 20 years to come to grips with this problem. And if we mean business from today onwards, if we put the best energies in this country in the service of this task. Therefore, to now say, let reservations go, doesn't help anything. Nor have reservations themselves helped. Therefore, my approach is fourfold. A, bring some rationality to reservations. In the name of reservations, a collector's son and a minister's daughter must not be a beneficiary. You are making a mockery of reservations. The intended benefit should be to the disadvantaged people. Those who benefited from the system should no longer have this extra advantage at the cost of the poorest of the poor. Because if the logic is that reservations will bring you out of this discrimination, then you've got the benefit, you're a collector. Collector is only an example. I'm talking about people who got a significant advantage. A professional, a doctor, a businessman, a public official, a politician, what happens? If you're saying no matter what your station in life is, even if you become Prime Minister of India, discrimination still continues, then the logic of reservation has collapsed. Then why reservation? Discrimination will never go. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. If we believe that reservation is a way of helping people come out of discrimination, then some people do come out of discrimination, therefore they no longer suffer from discrimination. There cannot be any other way of arguing this. What's now happening is the few vociferous people who got advantage of reservations, they want to perpetuate for their own kids' sake at the cost of the kids of others from the same communities. It's become a neo-Brahmanism today. The second is, there are many families in other communities which don't get the benefit of reservations who suffer from the same discrimination. Obviously, we can't now expand reservations because we already reached 50% quota, etc. And that's not an answer either. But we have to find more innovative methods of weightage. Today, a poor laborer's kid in a village going to a ramshackle government school, getting 75% score, let us say, without copying, and a collector's kid in an urban setting going to a good, fancy private school and being taught at home also, gets 80%. Really, which of them is truly bright? The 75% girl from the village or the 80% kid from the collector's family? Which of them is truly bright? The village kid. Have you found a system to measure the brightness? What do your admissions say? 80%, above 75%, 80% is merit, 75% is not merit. Create a nuanced system where there is some kind of a handicap given to that child. Suppose you give some weightage in terms of percentage marks, whatever, 5%, 10%. So details can be worked out by empirical observation and some research. But you must recognize that a 75% score of that kid in that village actually is much better than the 80% score of this boy here. If you haven't recognized, then you're talking about merit is hypocritical. Give that weightage so that this heartburn goes, even if there's no reservation formally for these communities. Third, then go about doing what we have discussed in the last 2 hours. Make this nation's first goal building a first-rate education system, no matter how much it takes, how much cost it involves, no matter how many people's lives are involved in that, how many people have to sacrifice their lives for a lifetime to transform the country. Make this the number one priority of the country and make sure that every child has access to decent quality education. And meanwhile, if a kid is really bright and has aspirations, let higher education not be denied for want of money. Create mechanisms by which you create the resources for them to get higher education. Once you do these 4 things with complete conviction, within 10-15 years reservations will disappear. You don't have to ask for them. Right now, without doing any of these, we hover about reservations. You only create a caste war. You don't solve any problem. It's unproductive. So there's no simple yes or no answer to reservations. Reservations are a very unsatisfactory response to an extremely tragic and extraordinarily complex situation we have created ourselves as a society. If you don't resolve that, talking about reservations is meaningless. Obviously, they're not a satisfactory response. They're not a solution. But it requires some response if you want to keep harmony in society. Otherwise, there's a bedrock. So please view it differently. Don't have this animosity about reservations versus no reservations. That doesn't solve us. We have to reconcile. Friends, I think we have gone way.
One last question. To do something to this education sector, what is your advice would be? You advise us to be in the public sector and do something, or be in the private sector and do something, because you have been an experienced public servant. So how difficult was your journey? Because I'm sure it would not have been easy. So how difficult was your journey to get even a minimum reform being a public servant?
There is no one answer. I think you can make an impact in both, in public sector and private sector, both. In public sector, obviously, in terms of education, I can't claim that I have succeeded significantly. My passion was to improve education and healthcare. I've been lionized as a public official, but I don't think my impact on the quality of education was substantially by the government. I must be candid. Maybe because Indian public systems haven't yet recognized the importance of education. I hope they are beginning to recognize it. Even now I'm not sure they have recognized. But even this much of recognition and awareness were not there at that time. And that's the reason why when I offered myself to actually be a czar of education in a few districts and say, I will do whatever I can to transform it. And I already proved my ability to bring out results, but denied the opportunity. But now I suppose somebody made such an offer, chances are that he or she will get that opportunity. So public system obviously gives you immense resources and a vast reach. But luckily, in some spheres, particularly education, this boundary between public and private is getting erased slowly. For many NGOs, many other organizations are making a huge impact on the public systems themselves by not being a part of the public system. So you don't have to make very difficult choices. Now, should I quit my Infosys job to improve education, therefore go back to education, then do what in education? It's not that the government is saying, look, now you're a bright person, you're from Infosys, I'll immediately make you an education officer, improve education. No. They'll make your life miserable. It's not as if there are easy entry points right now. Eventually it will happen, I'm sure. That's what some of us have been fighting for. In fact, at the Number Administrative Reforms Commission, I fought for it, and one day I'm sure it will become a reality. To completely erase the boundaries between public and private so that people can enter public service at any point of their choosing, if they have sufficient expertise and passion in a sector, and then serve the country for a number of years, and then get out whenever they want to. That's the kind of easy mobility that's required. Right now we haven't come to that stage. But in some sectors like education, it is still seen as non-political. They don't mind. No impacting on that. Therefore, many NGOs actually are making some significant impact in policy evolution and in public interventions and in actual interventions improving the quality of education at the grassroots level. So I think it can be done this way or that way. So don't have very difficult, agonizing choices. Staying awake till the middle of the night. Should I resign from Infosys? You don't have to. There are options available both ways. Friends, let me quickly conclude. I don't know if I could communicate a sense of what is happening and what's possible. Most of it is what you know anyway. There's nothing very spectacular I bring to the table. I only try to bring some insights. At the end of the day, we have to trust the communities. I remember a young peon, Ramulu, when I was a school kid. He was a young man who became the school attender, the chap who rang the bell and so on and so forth. And some years ago, I went to my school. I sat in the school steps, and I was chatting with Ramlu. I said, Ramlu, what happened to this school? It was such a wonderful school at that time. What happened to this school? I, of course, had a clear idea of what happened. I knew about stakeholding and power building, and then link between the two, and when they are separated, how institutions decline, and all this very complicated garbage I know. Ramlu told me in simple sentences, ఏం లేదయ్యా మీ చిన్నప్పుడు రైతుల పిల్లలంతా ఈ స్కూల్కి వచ్చేవాళ్ళు ఇప్పుడు అదంతా మానేసరయ్యా స్కూల్ నాశనం అయిపోయిందా. All that I would explain in very complicated terms, he explained in very simple, earthly terms in one sentence. When the stakeholders do not wield power, do not have voice, institutions decline. Schools function very well with inadequate infrastructure 40 years ago. Inadequate funding, poor infrastructure, low level of technology. We never even heard the word computer. I didn't know the word cricket or hockey when I was a child. It didn't make a difference. Those schools made excellent products. Thousands of them. The same schools with more teachers, better buildings, more wages, now many computers and all kinds of things, they're performing abysmally. You require stakeholder voice. But in education you have a special problem. In public systems, the stakeholder by definition is a voiceless, illiterate, poor person. Therefore, A, how can you give voice to him, her? And B, how can you make that voice sensible? First, they must know what they should seek. There's a challenge. So one way we can all impact is, that's why I'm asking you to adopt schools. Become the voice for the school. You may not be a direct stakeholder because your child is not studying there. But if we treat others as stakeholders in the community and care deeply enough for their children's education and become that voice, you will start making a difference. And if we institutionalize such an environment where that voice is there and stakeholding and this voice and this influence, if these two are integrated, that is when schools can improve. You have to throw a lot of money at it. You have to throw a lot of technology at it. You have to throw a lot of other resources at it. At the end of the day, you have to bring in accountability by fusing the stakeholder with voice. Please do what you can, because there's nothing more important for this country economically, believe me. If India is going to be destroyed eventually, it's not because of the infrastructural bottlenecks or other kinds, because they'll come in somewhere, if not today, tomorrow they'll come. If there's money, somebody will bring it. Otherwise, governments are now rich enough, they will pump money, that's not a big deal. They're swindling tens of thousands of crores. Most of the big deal is spending a few thousand crores here and there. That's not a problem. But education can come in because you throw money at it. It requires reinstitutionalization. It requires deepest possible commitment. All of us know when we educate our own younger brothers, sisters, and children, how tough it is to educate a child. It's a lifelong commitment. And to educate tens of millions of children is an incredible challenge in a very complex country. But nothing is more rewarding. For our efforts, nothing is more fulfilling. And if all of us together make that one difference, if there is a God and if he appears before me and says, don't have so many dreams, just have one dream, I would say education, education, education. If God offers me a second dream, I would say empowerment, empowerment, empowerment. After that, I'll be happy to say, God, take me away. I've done my job in this world. So I'm really happy that you've taken this initiative, but I want you to feel deeply the deprivation of the millions of people for no fault of theirs, and the economic and social consequences of that deprivation. And we can overcome that, and time is now. Luckily, right now it's opportune, and I hope all of you will make a significant difference in this absolutely vital sector. Thank you very much.